panelists and let things get started. So, Greg, all you.
Thanks, Jonathan. We are so fortunate to have with us 4 writers whose career thus far have given some of the most inventive, provocative, and, yes, creative works being produced today. I'm going to point you to the events program with that link for everyone's longer bio information. I'll give you a little bit of an intro as I introduce you to each of our 4 panelists, but suffice it to say that these folks are clearly 4 of the best in our profession. So we've asked each of them to share a bit of their creative points of view that go beyond, just the nuts and bolts of playmaking. And so first up, it's my pleasure to introduce Audrey Sepperly. Her work includes award-winning plays like The Gulf, Maytag Virgin, and Alabaster. Alabaster was slated for a record-breaking 11-city rolling world premiere this year, including theaters in Dallas, Sacramento, Chicago, lots of other places. Deep sad sigh.
There's 6 of them.
Okay, well that's six down. She's developed plays at many of the country's most prestigious theater companies, including Green Stage, Signature Theater, Florida Rep, many others. Theater Magazine named her one of the 6 theater workers you should know. So let's get to know Audrey.
Well, I just want to thank you for including me. It's an honor to be on this panel and to talk about something that I've been writing about for years, which is, the distillation of our stories and how to get to the essence of them. I've lectured about this. I've written articles for various magazines about this. It's important to me. It's important to my process. And I was frustrated for years because the kinds of things that I was wanting to do to my stories and the processes that I was following, I didn't really see it documented anywhere. I didn't really, I open a playwriting textbook and it's a lot of times it's the same old stuff. And so I'll get into this in a minute. I'm going to share this screen with you. I traverse in, let me know if you see what you should be seeing.
I see it.
You should be seeing that panel that says, "What's your advice on dialogue?" So that was what'd you say?
We all see it, I think.
Okay. So this was a question posed of me in the Dramatist magazine, like, what's your advice on dialogue? And I was like, what? My only opinion of it is that there's too much of it. The first thing I think of when I think of dialogue is it's a necessary evil. It gets way more credit than it deserves, and the reason I know this is because silence never gets the credit it deserves. And so that's my crazy math is why isn't silence? Why isn't subtext? Why isn't that getting as much attention as writing good dialogue? I'm just going to scroll through here. This is one of the articles that I wrote some years back when my play Maytag Virgin was going live for its world premiere. And this one went viral. I reread it for the purposes of this discussion and pretty much still checks out. We're all pretty much walking around on the planet spiritually deprived and emotionally depleted, especially now, emotionally sort of spent. And I believe, and I think this has played out many times in my own work, is that silence is necessary. It allows us to feel something. And I'll get into more of that in a minute. I also just want to say, it bears saying in this overall discussion that, there's a lot of malpractice in theater. There are a lot of directors that want to compress your work to to beat some land speed record. I don't know what that's about, directing for pace and all that. I do understand that pace is important. But if your story is told largely in those quiet moments, this could be a serious problem. And so knowing yourself as an artist and knowing how your stories are being conveyed, how much of it is being, how much of it is conveyed in those silent moments underneath the words, is going to be crucial in the rehearsal room. Actors and directors need to understand your style. They need to be given permission to slow the hell down, right? And recognize and honor those beats and silences, at least in the beginning. They don't have to be sacrosanct. Nothing in your play should ever be sacrosanct, not even a beat or a pause or a silence. But at least work with you on those and honor them, because they're just as vital as the words themselves. In this same article, I asked, I just put out like a post on my Facebook page, asking for some crystalline examples of some of the best moments of silence in playwriting. And I got hundreds and hundreds, and these are some of them. When Bessie spills her pills near the end of Marvin's room, that little everyday problem just becomes overwhelming after what she's just dealt with. The pause just after Lucky's speech in waiting. Do you say Gatto or Godot? I always say Godot. What is it?
I say Gatto now because it's also I'm supposed to.
Okay. When Estragon waits before saying, I think he's tired. And then, Annie Baker has a whole... My silences, I never go full Annie Baker with my silences, and arguably, she's doing something new with silence. But this isn't one of them. This is just classic silence and storytelling, where, there's a pause between the lines. I don't want my parents to die. That's it, So, and that pause can take however long the actor needs or however long the director wants. But, there's something happening in that pause, So just like in real life, noise is a distraction. Words, when there's too many of them, keep us from focusing on what's really important. In contrast, silence gives us time to breathe. It gives us time to think. And in playwriting, the interesting thing is, or what I've discovered, is that silence, or more specifically cuts, in your work, return a gift of tension. I'm going to get more into that in a minute, but the silence allows us to insert ourselves into that narrative and say, yes, this feels like me. Something about this is familiar. And if all we hear is noise, it's really hard for us to get to that intimate place with the characters, right? And experience that. Screenwriters, they get told this on day one, right? Use less. Tell the story with as few words as possible. And Alex has something to say about this, but I advise every playwright to take a screenwriting class and steal what you can. Here's what silence is not. It's not nothing. In other words, just because nothing is happening, that doesn't mean nothing is happening. The same with subtext, right? Here's Ross, 2 words, I'm fine. And we all know, just like when your girlfriend says this, he's definitely not fine. He's a lot of things in that moment, but he's not fine. This is a classic example of subtext, what's going on beneath the words. I think maybe he might be saying, well, he's definitely saying, I'm not fine. I know that much. But maybe he's saying, why is life so hard? Why does this keep happening to me? I'm angry, I'm broken. When is the pain going to stop? He's not fine. So these are the universal questions in life. When will the pain stop? How did I get so stuck? Is this normal? How do I unstuck myself? Why is love so hard? And so when a character says, I'm fine, some of you may recognize this as like straight up passive aggression. And it is, but it's way more than that. The subtext is, here is, my life is falling apart. I thought this was an interesting gift because here's what that same sentiment looks like without any of the subtext at all. And men will love this because finally a woman is saying exactly what she's thinking. There's no mystery here, right? Everything hurts. And let's say, I'm dying. And what's so wrong with characters saying exactly what they mean all the time? Well, that's certainly a choice. But wouldn't we like a little mystery, some tension, some fire maybe? Right? So let's see this in practice. Let's actually walk through an example. In my playwright vocabulary, which you can see on my website, this vocabulary I created out of frustration from not being able to communicate with directors what I was thinking, and wanting to teach what I knew. I've been experimenting a lot with hypnotic storytelling, specifically in playwriting, almost palliative care, like when you get an audience member in that suggestive state and then you walk them through a story, they can't help but experience that with you. And so we hear about hypnotic storytelling devices a lot in advertising and in persuasive speaking, but I'm sort of trying to blaze this trail here and write a book about how we can use those same techniques in playwriting. So anyway, this is one of my vocabulary words. It's the word defragmenting, and I think a lot of you, well, some of us older here, remember when you had a process on your computer where you would defragment your hard drive and it would compress everything and then everything would be better and not so slow. So to me, in playwriting, defragmenting means that it's when you examine a scene for flow and energy. Same could be said for a sentence even, and remove anything that doesn't belong, right? The dirt, any shit that's getting in the way, so that the whole thing is tighter and cleaner. And this is why we write. And write, and pile the sand so that we have opportunities for removal, right? I would say, if you want a 90-minute play, I would advise you to write 120 minutes of material, at least, and then begin the defragmenting process of what we're removing, always removing. So here's a line. Let's imagine that this is delivered by a man who has just knocked on the door of a woman he's gone out with once before, and he's at her door, just inside her apartment, entering her apartment for the first time for their second date. And he says, "Oh my gosh, you look so pretty in that dress. Where did you get it?" So there's a lot of things about this line that are problematic, not the least of which is I don't think men talk this way. Not straight men, and definitely not on the second date. But the biggest issue is that it's noisy, and I don't know what to focus on. Should I be focused on his attraction to her? Should I be focused on her appearance? Should I be focused on the dress? Where did she get it? It's a cute dress, like a thrift store. In fact, this is a version of a line that exists in one of my plays, and her reply to him is, "It's a thrift store dress," which is probably not quite what he really wanted to know, but that's what she answers. That's beside the point. So, oh my gosh, you look so pretty in that dress. Where did you get it? We have 15 words and a very exacting sentence for an actor. An actor might have two choices to play this very word-heavy, syllable-heavy sentence. That's not fun for an actor. But let's think on this. Right, the fewer words you give to an actor, the more choices they have, right? This is a great truth. the less words an actor has to deal with, the more choices they have, and the more opportunities they have to really try things. And so out of compassion, it's always nice to think about your actor as you're grooming. Is this a sentence you would want to say? What can we do? So to cut as much as possible, right? So that the actors don't have the burden of a sentence like this, and so that they can communicate things in other ways, specifically silence. So here's what happens if we defragment and we take half the sentence away. You look so pretty in that dress. It's fewer syllables, 7 words, we have less noise, but the tone is really sort of the same. It doesn't impart, it doesn't really give anything away. I'm sorry. It doesn't, there's no tell here. It's just a very straightforward bit of, unless the actor's lying. But what happens if we reduce it further to just that dress with an ellipses after it? Now we have 2 words and maybe 15 choices. We have ellipses, right, to signal that the character is in a whole moment there. There's a difference between a period and an ellipses. There's a big difference in playwriting. One is, this is the end of the sentence. The other is, wait, something else is happening. And I don't know what you're thinking, but for me, the tension is now much higher because I don't exactly know what this character means by that. I would have to look at his expression and maybe try to intuit his heartbeat to understand. Does he mean that dress? Does he mean that dress? That dress, like you could go on and on. But the point is there's silence, there's restraint here, and there's electricity where there wasn't before. And there are so many ways to play this moment. And it's a paradox, right? In playwriting, less is always more. Every time you cut a word, a sentence, a page, a reply, and an answer to a question, the script automatically returns this amazing gift of tension, right? It's not hard to imagine this moment with no words at all. He enters her apartment and just stares at her. If you want to know how to create mystery and tension in your plays, this is how you do it. You have to be audacious and trust those moments and write more than you need so that there's room for cuts. And by the way, this all works way better if you refuse, to stick to some agenda, some hashtag, some intentionality in your work. I highly encourage anyone watching this to go on YouTube after this panel discussion and watch this 5-minute video, maybe 6-minute video of George Saunders talking about, it's a George Saunders it's a beautiful little 6-minute film really of George Saunders talking about how to remove the intentionality in your stories.
We can actually post that. I'm going to find the link and we'll post it in the chat function. I'm afraid we got to kind of move on, but
yeah, I'm done. I'm pretty much done. And anyway, the point I want to try to make is the play doesn't care about your feelings. The play just wants to work, it wants to fly. So get out of, just get out of the way. This is just a link. Sorry, just a bit about my vocabulary, which you can find on my website. I'm really looking forward to hearing how everyone else sort of parses this discussion. That's all I have for now.
I was going to say, if anybody has not checked out Audrey's website, this is a playwriting primer. And regardless of where you are in your process, I really stress that she has some great stuff on her website. Thanks. So now we move on to Ingrid Craig Galvan. She joins us now. Her plays include Black Superhero and Magic Mom, which played Geffman in LA, I Go Somewhere Else, which played Playwrights Arena. She's developed work at the O'Neill Conference, among others, and currently has commissions from LA's Greenway Court Theater, New York's Prime Stages. She counts among her honors the Kessling Prize and Jeffrey Melnick New Playwright Award. She's currently writing for the new CBS All Access series Happy Days, and she was previously a writer for ABC's How to Get Away with Murder and The Rookie. I give you in the Great Calhoun.
Thank you, Greg. Hi. Thanks so much for having me. I'll try to get into this and get out. I love playing with Audrey brought up Ulysses, that's my jam. I love playing with the action lines, the stage direction, making sure that my voice as a playwright is not just in the dialogue or in the plotting of it, but in the stage directions as well. And it just makes the read feel like it's an end of play when you're not dropping out of those action lines, of those stage directions. I have a little slide thing to, a little page to share.
Is it up?
Yes, it's up. Can we just scooch up to that first highlight? This is from Player Call, Welcome to Matson. That's cool there. So the first thing that I like to do in terms of subtext and in terms of stage direction is giving the characters their shorthand so that they feel like real people, so that they feel like they have a life. So starting with Patricia's line, they're hosting a dinner party. These are 4 African-American characters in this play. Patricia says, "You think they'll be late?" The stage direction is, he gives her a look because CP time. And then he says, Gerald says, "Really, Patty?" No, I'm not saying that, although probably that, but I wasn't saying that. So if you know what CP time is, you know what it is. If you don't, it's a secret. But these characters have that as a shorthand, and they know what that means to each other. And it helps the actors to know this is how Patricia thinks of the people who are coming here. We know who the people are. We know something about the people that are coming here for this dinner party without explicitly saying it. And that's all you need is to give them that shorthand. We can scooch up to the next one. Patricia says during the dinner party, "Of course it is. Help yourselves." Corey suppresses a laugh. Regina slaps his arm. Come on over here, man. You're giving, this is my attempt to give them a secret. Giving the characters secrets and subtext. We will see someone later saying that same "help yourself" line, and they have the same response, like, "Shh, stop doing it." And then the second time it happens, someone does call them out on it. Like, that's the second time you two have done that. What is that about? And we do learn later what it's about. It was a joke that it has a punchline, "help yourself." But it's a joke between Corey and Regina that kind of comments on how they feel about their hosts. But giving them their secret and then their subtext to play in that moment is the purpose of that stage direction. Towards the bottom of the same page, thank you. They go to the mantel to examine it, a jumping room. Regina picks up a snow globe that rests there and turns it over a few times. Patricia swiftly replaces it back on the mantel and says, "That's a special little souvenir. It's inexpensive, but the trip was quite memorable." She does not say, "Don't touch that." She does not say, "Be careful, don't break that." From her action, we know she does not want this woman, or probably anyone, touching that thing that's really, really important to her. We do learn later on that the snow globe is actually a much bigger thing in the play. Spoiler alert, they are all trapped inside the snow globe. But in this moment, we know that Regina is the kind of person who will go into anybody's house and pick up anything and put her hands on it and take a look at it. And we know that Patricia is the kind of woman who will take that back, who won't ask, who will just take it back. So we learn a lot about the characters, and we give the actors clues. The next page is all about giving the actors clues. It's messy looking on purpose, but in reading it, even in a cold reading, the actors get how they're supposed to read this. And Alicia Harris, who wrote Is God Is, and What Goes Up, no. I can't remember the title of the play. she does a really, really amazing job of, if you ever get a chance in her plays, showing you how to read the dialogue, showing how the story is to be told in the way it looks on the page. And here we see ellipses used in the stage directions, and also, I don't know if I have any ellipses in the dialogue here, but in the stage directions. Can we scooch up just a tab to that first ellipses? Thanks, Greg. Patricia heads into the kitchen, pissed, and then we wait. And this is an ellipsis for everyone. And then we wait again. And then finally, Regina speaks. That was poor communication on my part. Yeah, it was, right, Gerald? Definitely. And those are staggered because they're not talking at the same time, but they're right up on top of each other. And that builds the tension and the comic timing to have them holding, and then finally blurting everything out. And that takes the temperature of the room. Regina studied interpersonal communication. And then we have another ellipses and another ellipses. Ed, go to State University. Yeah, I'm going to go check on him. You should do that. Yep. Gerald likes this in the kitchen. Regina and Corey share a look. They fucked up. But they're still happy. And I do curse in my stage directions. I do. But I think instead of saying they feel bad about this, they feel, I like to use stage directions that speak in the same language that the play is speaking in, the same language that the characters speak in. And then the last one is about, I think, talking to designers, because I do that a lot in my plays as well. Corey and Gerald, so there's a whole scene, Patricia and Regina in the kitchen, they're having a Tina Turner moment. Just read it, if it makes sense. Go back to the living room. Corey and Gerald should have on coats now. Gerald probably got up and got them somewhere in the Tina moment. So I say probably because there were 2 lines of dialogue earlier where someone says she probably baked it. It's probably dry. And so I continue with the same language of the play when I say Gerald probably got up and got the coat somewhere in the Tina moment. I could have in the Tina moment, of course, said, you know, it could have stopped that moment to say, in this moment, Gerald gets up and goes and gets a coat. That would have interrupted the scene prior, the moment prior. But it should be casual. It should be, I'm letting whoever designs this play when it's no longer in my hands know that this is a casual thing. Just let them go get a coat and bring it over. It's not a big deal, but by the time we come back, and I'm going to tell you when to have them do it. I'm not going to direct them to go do it at a specific point in the play, but they should probably have the coats by now by the time we come back to them. I also have a later stage direction that says something like, Patricia holds up a flyer, do what you got to do, so the audience gets what it is. I like to talk to the designers just to make sure that it's understood what kind of magic, without saying specifically, do it this way. I think in Black Superhero Magic Mama, I said this should look magical, so do something magical here. So yeah, those are my fun things that I like to do in viewing my stage directions with a little bit of me and a little bit of subtext.
Well, you know what's interesting? We're going to talk about this during the interchange part, but I'm sensing also that even in these moments, the author's voice comes through in a way that you may not have expected. So that's a really interesting something that I just realized from your examples. Thanks. So we're going to go on to Alexander and our student who won the Academy Award Golden Globe for the script of the fantastic film Birdman or the Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. His plays include Red Dog Howls, Still the Chaos Theories, and In This Our Time, all produced at various New York theaters, New York being his spiritual and I think literal home. He also wrote the book for the Broadway musical On Your Feet, based on the life of Gloria Estefan. And he is now the co-creator of an upcoming series called 1% Stars, and is co-writing a feature film with director Guillermo del Toro. And we're so happy to have you here. Alex, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. I guess I feel as usual, less prepared than the ladies that came before me. I guess what I've been dealing with most of my career has been trying to understand structure and the flexibility of it. And I sort of agree with so many things that each of the ladies said before me, and I feel encouraged and agitated, which I think is the best way to feel when you talk about these things. If form follows function, then structure's been what I've been sort of wrestling with for the longest time, and I've been lucky enough to explore in a whole different bunch of styles, screenplays, plays, musical theater, which is a little bit different, television. But structure, and it has been forever. And I'm always stunned by, there are writers like Lynn Nottage, who the structure is just rock solid, and the poetry pours out of the structure. And there are writers like Martina Mayak, who is a poet by heart, but the structure pours out of the poetry. And there is no right and wrong about that. But these are two of my favorite writers that I've been dealing with and reading now. I have the fortune to be producing Martina's play, Breaking News, as a film. Cost of Living, her Pulitzer Prize winner. She's going to adapt it into a film, and my company's going to produce it. I say that just to champion Martina. So for me, it's always been structure. It's been two ideas that I've been wrestling with seemingly forever, two sort of Aristotelian ideas. The one idea surrounds the theory of surprising inevitability, that we pursue the end of a scene, a beat, a moment, a play, with the idea that as we reach the ending, not only are we shocked that it has happened, but if we think hard enough, we think, of course, that happened. Everything was laid out in front of me, which is not unlike an illusion, which I think storytelling is. I think we all agree in some way, shape, or form. And the idea of action, conflict, and reversal, where I think we all learn a lot about action and conflict. That's simple enough, but I think reversals are something that people have not understood very well, or presume them to be some surprise or some twist, and that's not it. It's a reversal, an expectation of what the action was going to lead to. And these two things for me have been sort of an endless, glorious struggle, whether it was Still Life, my play, or whether it was Birdman or The Revenant, or all different styles. By the way, talk about silence, Revenant was just entirely silent for the most part, and very difficult to get around that way story-wise, where Birdman was just chat the whole time, because we were sort of duplicating the idea of theater and film in the same moment. So again, I think form follows function, but I believe very much in what Audrey was saying, and actually that into it as well, that there are these moments, and I do saying that like my stage directions read as differently for every piece I wrote as the pieces they are. And Audrey, I agree implicitly, and especially in screenwriting, you're right. If you can have it without the words, do it without the words. But if I pass those, I'll just talk about for a minute surprising inevitability. I think Red Dog Howls, my play that was over in Los Angeles, and we did a New York Theater workshop with the brilliant Kathleen Chalfant. It was a very difficult play. I'm half Puerto Rican Cuban on one side, and I'm half Greek Armenian on the other side. And my grandmother was fled Armenia at the time of the genocide. And I wrote a play that wasn't necessarily about the genocide, but was about a young Greek man who didn't know he was Armenian, basically, and was introduced to this figure that he learned to be his grandmother. I actually conceived the theatrical sort of premise of it at the Theater of Dionysus in Greek, when I was sitting on those stones, just looking at the circle, thinking, oh, this is what this play I'm thinking about is. It's just three warrior actors throwing lore at each other, and I thought, this is something I want to try, which is always a terrible idea out there. It leads to a very rocky path. But I knew in writing A Dog Howls, and I know most of you won't be familiar with it, but in genocide stories, what we've been trained to do is learn that the climax is a genocide story, is the story, it's Sophie's Choice, it's, Schindler's List. It comes to an event. And in mine, I started it with the idea of somebody who is this man who is lost and has a wife who's pregnant, but the pregnancy has been troubled, and he's just lost. His father's just passed away. And I'm going to do it quickly. And in his father's closet, his father was his best friend and his hero, and he's the one that sort of inspired him to write by saying words mean everything. Don't hold it against them. And he was like, words mean everything, and he chooses them carefully. And when his father was dead, he went into the closet and found a shoebox full of envelopes that were opened and then sealed in with Scotch tape. And all they had in common was a return address of this V. Afratian, 247 Audubon Avenue, Washington Heights, New York, blah, blah, blah. And on top of the shoebox was a note from his father that said, don't open anything inside this box. And his argument to the audience is that his father told him his whole life that words matter. And why did he say don't open anything inside this box and not don't open this box? And so he opens the box, but doesn't open what's inside, but he hunts down the return address that's on those letters. And he ends up inadvertently finding his grandmother. Now, we go through the story looking for it. And I try to go back and forth. What I knew was my ending wasn't about the genocide story. My ending was about putting to bed the pain of the past, but taking the lesson with us, right? Trying to put to sleep the awful pain of what came before us, but never letting go of the strength of the lesson. But the audience trained in these stories knew that the climax was going to be a terrible genocide story, which it is. What they didn't see coming, whether they loved the play and hated the play, and I got plenty of both to this day. People come up to me and either hug me or scowl at me if they know the play. But I didn't mean that. But we get to this climactic story, which explains why this grandmother had to remove herself from the family. It's an awful, awful genocide story that I took from not only the Armenian genocide, but actually I took this particular horrible act from a genocide in the Congo, and because I knew to get to my ending of the play, which I sort of, to get to the ending of my play, which was impossible. In the end of the play, Michael, the hero, has to do something unthinkable. But to get there, I had to make the pain of the grandmother so absolutely terrible that there was no other choice, that you would forgive him for it and forgive her for asking for it. And so I had to go through, which was the worst research of my entire life, go through these genocide stories. Because I knew people have lived with genocide, during the Holocaust, during Rwanda. People have lived with genocide for sadly, for centuries. But if it was something we thought, well, people have lived through that, you would still not forgive them. So I literally looked for the thing that hurt me the worst, but still stuck thematically with my story. And it's a really, really awful, awful, awful thing that happens. And she bears her soul and breaks down, and the audience thinks, well, I reached the end of this road. And then it's not until it's all over that you realize why you're here in the first place. And you realize the entire time, and it's a spoiler alert because the play's not published, actually. There's a long story in that, and politics. But in the end, he locks himself in the apartment with her and realizes what she's been asking him to do this entire play, which was to put her to rest, because her religious beliefs believed she couldn't do that to herself. So it really ends up being sort of, in a way, skirting on euthanasia. But we realize the whole time she's been feeding him food. She keeps talking about making him stronger, and she doesn't know why, but this grandmother sort of has superpowers. She arm wrestles him, she's 92, and she beats him, a 30-something-year-old man. Like, it has magical elements to it. But in the end, now the audience sits and realizes, I was in it for this. But what the surprisingly inevitable end of it, I hope if I was successful, which something like what, but the high dive was to say you weren't looking at this. Your eyes were on this because you're trained for that. But it's not this. It's what this leads to, and it's the pain that this came from, and it's this. And when it happened, it was one of those really terrific moments you have at a playwright when you sit in the audience and you hear, and I imagine you've all heard it one time or another, and it fills you with joy for a long time. You hear the gasp, which is involuntary. Laughs can be voluntary. Tears can even be voluntary. Gasps can never be involuntary. And you heard the breath taken in the air, and to Audrey's point, a devastating silence of some 90 seconds, which is forever in stage time, maybe even longer. And I realized, so in constructing the play, every scene that I went was heading toward this real end, not the narrative climax, which was the genocide story. And when the audience looked back, or the people that came a second or third or fourth time, which is how the people who loved the play did, they would start to, you start later in the run at New York Theater Workshop, you'd start to hear ahas as the benign exposition was coming through, because they realized, oh, that's the first time. And it's so weird, because the people that were there to see it for the first time didn't. And so I think there's this fascinating moment. I think that Birdman, when in its element, written mostly by me and a guy named Nico Giacobone, who's my writing partner on it, and my dear friend, with the story with Alejandro and Armando. But Birdman, not much different, right? The first frame of the film is Michael Keaton. Now he's floating, and he's in his underwear, so it's weird. But he's meditating. The act of meditation is the act of silence one's mind. As this goes on, we realize he actually has a voice in his head that he's trying to silence, which is the ego, which is Birdman. And then in the end, well, we can talk to Alejandro about an extra scene that's added at the end. But the actual end was a gun in the head, Michael on stage, across the audience. He finally hears the adoration that he wants because he told the truth on stage. And the camera flew up over Michael, up through the grid, up over the St. James, up over Broadway, up over New York, up out into the stratosphere, and it flew away. And that was the original end of Birdman. We could argue both. It turns out that the stupid film did okay after all. We thought it was going to be some indie thing that 7 people saw. But he tried to silence the voice in scene 1. And the act of shooting himself is simply the conclusion of what he set out to do in the first scene, which was to shut the ego down in his head, shut the voice down in his head. And so for me, I've been fascinated with that. Now, there are times when that's hackneyed. People have criticized the off-bad M. Night Shyamalan film or what that is. And there's a difference between surprise and a twist. And then there's a difference between surprise and inevitability. And I think when you look at Junk, Death of a Salesman, we could go on forever, right?
I thought Death of a Salesman was Junk. I talked about
No. But the plays I truly adore. The most rewarding for me have always been Amadeus. Have always reached this place that's so fulfilling, because you're like, yes, you laid out the clues and I sniffed them like a truffle pig the whole time, and I still didn't see what I was coming to. I still didn't know it was going to be a pineapple. Like I had no idea, but you told me about the tropics in the first, and I think like the works of Marquez that have this magical element always appealed to me, and it's reflected in my work, I think. But for me, I think that's an amazing lesson, even if you don't write that way, because I love plays that aren't written that way. But for me, it's an amazing lesson in muscularity of structure, of purpose, and it's a very difficult thing to set the audience believing that you set the path this way, but genuinely have set it another way. But they run so parallel that they are not sure, they're just taking you down the road. And I think it's an extraordinary exercise, whether you're at home writing a 10-minute play or a scene, just to say, what is the expectancy? What expectancy have I built? Or what expectancy can I find that runs so similar in DNA and theme to what I'm really getting to, that I will have you on the road of your own misjudgment until you come to the right. The old man says to Oedipus, don't do that, it's a bad idea. Don't go searching for anything, don't cure anything. Of course, because he ends up being the plague himself. And I think those things have turned me on for a long time. And whether it's been in musical theater even or whatever, I think the bodyguard musical, I still employ the same tactics, and it never gets tired for me because I never feel like I master it, and I always feel like there's more I can do, but it keeps me excited and active. And that's what I need to do. It's hard for me to write. It keeps me driving forward like a good puzzle.
Thanks, Alex. And I want to get back to it when we start, having some crosstalk, because I think it's very interesting. The three of you who have spoken so far, there are some real common threads that we may not even realize about each other. Certainly, the infusion of natural realism that Inda has been using in her scripts, and the kind of hybridization of scripts that is happening. So I want to have our fourth panelists jump in here, and anyone who's involved in theater has to know the plays of Michael Gallagher. One of the most frequently produced playwrights in this country. His plays include Opus, Red Herring, Tooth and Claw, Incorruptible, and Empty Plated Café du Grand Boeuf, all of which premiered at Philadelphia's Art Theater Company, which has been created for many years. He's also recently collaborated on musicals such as Wonderful Noise at Colorado's Creed Rep and a new translation of Cyrano, their composer, in DC's Boulder Theater. And aside from all of this, he's a professor of theater and artistic director at Villanova University. And he's pronounced his name with a hard G.
It's not that. Greg, it's a great privilege to be in such good company on this panel, and also a challenge to say what terrain might have been covered. I want to explore objects a little bit today, and to kind of kick us off, I want to light a candle. This candle actually is special in my household. We call it the Mark Rylance candle because we took my family to see Twelfth Night on Broadway with the Globe production starring Mark Rylance. And my wife got us tickets on stage because you could sit on the stage or in the house. And my daughter, who was 8, was watching the whole show wrapped. And at the curtain call, Mark Rylance went over to a chandelier that is filled with beeswax candles, picked one out, blew it out, and came over and offered it to my daughter. And she was so flummoxed and didn't know what to do, whether she was allowed to take this thing. He encouraged her, and she took it. So it's a very special candle in my house, and we light it sparingly on special occasions. So I'm lighting it today partly because I want to talk about objects and how objects have power on stage and how we can invest them with power on stage. And happily, a lot of what I'm going to say already, the three of you have touched upon in different ways. So beginning with Audrey's call for more silence and fewer words, I think one of the ways that we're often duped by playwriting is because we write words that we think they're about words. And certainly English teachers often think of plays as just that kind of literature where you have a character name and then a line and a stage direction. And of course, we're writing everything. We just happen to be using words to notate it with. But as Audrey noted, among the most powerful moments, in fact, are not words at all. They are silence. And in this case in particular, I want to look at objects having power. We think about a writer like Shakespeare being the great poet of the theater, and he was pretty good with words, not a bad poet of words, but also a kind of peerless poet of the image. And one of the ways I like to talk with my students about it is imagine, a guy dressed in black holding up a skull and considering a skull. Well, that would be a fairly interesting stage image in the first place, right? Skulls are loaded. But Shakespeare goes further. He says, well, this isn't just any skull. This happens to be a skull that was dug up as a grave needed to be dug and made room for somebody new. And not only that, but it's actually the skull of a guy that Hamlet knew, and not only knew, but loved, hung on the back of, rode on the back of, kissed his lips, and now he's confronted with this particular skull here. So that skull is suddenly wildly meaningful. And it's not surprising that image has kind of become the archetype or, even cliche of theater, in the same way that the Mona Lisa is an archetype for painting and ba-ba-ba-ba is an archetype for classical music. It is an image that speaks volumes. And Shakespeare knew that. In the same play, of course, he brings us a ghost, and a play within a play, and the guy gets stabbed behind a tapestry, and it turns out that the grave has been dug for Hamlet's girlfriend. So there's a lot of other cool things. He was a great poet of the image, which we oftentimes forget. I'm glad Alex mentioned Lynn Nottage because she's a favorite of mine. And at Villanova University, where I oversee all the productions, we did Intimate Apparel a couple of years ago. And I was really stunned by the way that ordinary objects in that play are infused with meaning. A piece of fabric that is held by two different characters, smelled, the texture of it appreciated. Corsets are throughout the play. A sewing machine has value. A letter between a man who writes it and then later on is received by a character who can't even read the words because she's not able to read and needs to hand it to someone else. Every time an object appears, it's a kind of transaction between characters, and those objects are invested with weight. They don't mean anything until the playwright invests them with meaning. 25 years, maybe 28 years ago in Philadelphia, I saw a production of Carol Churchill's Mad Forest, the opening scene of which is two daughters returning home to their family, to their father and mother, and they've scored a pack of American cigarettes and 4 eggs. And they are delighted with what they brought home. It's clearly a major thing. And the father is cagey and not very effusive about this for some reason. And eventually goes over and he takes one of the eggs, considers it, and throws it on the ground, and it breaks. And everything stops. The mother takes the other 3 eggs and takes them to safety. And one of the daughters who's come home goes and grabs a cup and a spoon, and she spoons the broken egg, whatever she can, into the cup. The value of an egg, which most of us go like, an egg, there are more. Suddenly, an egg is really something. Now, I don't remember a line of Mad Forest. I couldn't recite a line for you, but I will remember that image and the way that an egg was invested with power for the rest of my life. So I try to do this with my own plays. The play Opus, which Greg mentioned, is about a string quartet that's imploding. And, you know, a string quartet is not a kind of world where you're going to have people whipping out weapons, shooting each other. So I knew that if I was going to find extremity in the play, if I was going to find what is an act of violence, what is something that pushes the action to an extreme that is both surprising and yet inevitable, to quote Alex, then I would need to look at the world of the string quartet to say what are the things of greatest value, what are the things that are most precious. So for the play, I invented a fictional luthier who has made a pair of matching violin and viola, these 2 instruments. And they become associated with 2 characters in the play who are in this world-class string quartet who happen to be lovers. One plays violin, one plays the viola. And at one point in the play, you learn that these instruments are so closely linked together that the maker, who made very few instruments, cut them from the same tree. In fact, you could trace the grain from one to the other. So the objects are a way of linking the 2 characters as sort of a kind of destined to be together, so that in the play, when that is ruptured, it has meaning. But late in the play, when the quartet is in a great squabble at the end of the play, determining who's going to stay in and who gets kicked out, and it turns out the first violinist will be kicked out, the cellist of the quartet picks up the violin and smashes it on the back of a chair, completely destroys the violin. This is a very ghastly moment, typically in the theater. And when we actually did the production, when we did the first production, it was a co-pro, and the company bought 120 $16 violins from a Chinese factory that made them for students. So these things were really pieces of crap. And I know this because I'm a classically trained musician. That was my undergraduate degree. So the violin itself was meaningless, but the violin that I invested meaning in was priceless. And not only priceless because it was worth a lot of money, but because it was deeply connected to a character and deeply connected to a relationship. And that was basically killing the baby, is what I was thinking of it as in the play. How do you invest in it and then utilize what an audience has invested in an object. And I love the references to the shoebox full of letters. I love Inda's reference to a snow globe in that play. All of these are objects that playwrights invest with meaning. So my main, message to my students and to playwrights in general is we mustn't abdicate responsibility for the stage picture to our directors and to our designers. Those people are going to be incredible collaborators with us, but whether you're Shakespeare or Lynn Nottage or Theresa Rebeck or you, your ability to write the image, to make sure that indelible relationships between actors and objects are present in the play, you mustn't abdicate that. And because human beings are of a certain scale, and because in the theater a human being is usually somewhere between about 5 feet and 6 feet tall, that objects about as small as a coin and about as big as a piano are very meaningful. We understand that these are the things that give our life value. I have a confession to make. This isn't actually the Mark Rylance candle. There is a Mark Rylance candle. It's over here. It's my daughter's, so I didn't burn it. But the point being that although I lied about the specific Mark Rylance candle, this is a prop and this one is real. Hopefully, I was able to invest it with meaning in the same way that we can invest objects with meaning on stage.
I thought you were going to make us all gasp by suddenly having that candle to get destroyed.
I got to tell you, Greg, that what I actually thought I would do is take a piece of paper, which was a letter from my grandfather from writing from Europe in World War II, hold it over the candle, and then have the thing burst into flame. But I didn't want to horrify anyone. So.
Thanks, everybody. And I want to have a little bit of crosstalk. I have some questions, but I wondered if any of you have questions for each other or comments on what you all have said. I'm going to shut up and just see if that happens, and if not, I've got questions for you. Anybody?
I'll ask Bobby a question.
Sure.
Do you decide to choose stories and or characters that leave you more space, since you tend to respond to the subtext and the silence? Do you tend, in other words, you couldn't write, forgive me, I'm not talking politically, but you couldn't write the Donald Trump play and look for silence, right? So do you you know what I mean? You tend to lean towards quieter circumstance or quieter characters, or do you find the silence even in the madness of a Ricky Roma?
So that's a really good question.
And you have to I mentioned both Trump and Madden in the same sentence, so I've been in that whole.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think that the first thing I want to say is it's just incredibly important now more than ever with what's going on in the world for us to really, really embrace the primitive nature of what we're doing. And I think that there's a lot of like show your work. We're all looking for ideas, right? Which is why this panel is so wonderful, is to demystify what it means to write. There's this sort of notion that writers know these amazing questions or know these amazing plots when they sit down to write the play, and unless you're doing some sort of adaptation, and even then, we really don't, as writers, and I'll just speak for myself, I never know what these questions or who these characters are going to be when I sit down to write. Typically, I actually write the big dramatic rise of my play. I write that first. I start with some sort of image, some sort of exciting image, like something's on fire or someone just pushed somebody out of a boat. What is this? Like, what caused this? And, we're holding a skull. What happened just before that? And what happened just before that? And what happened? So I'll write it backwards to avoid any intentionality at all. And then I start thinking, like, who are the characters that could be a part of whatever this rise is? And they begin to reveal themselves. And I will say that no one loves a rant or a one-page soliloquy as much as me, and those are in my plays too. But like with Alabaster, and that's my latest, actually that's going to print next week, I think, Samuel French. There are some wonderful long soliloquies in there and monologues and things, but there's also sections of rapid fire, there's sections of vast silences, there's sections, a recurring motif, actually, where the characters are audibly breathing because they need to remind themselves to breathe. It's actually very Annie Baker in those moments. And I have a footnote, honor these breaths. This isn't just a whim. Like, when the characters are breathing, they're actually about to start into uncharted territory. So I guess the answer is that my plays have a rhythm of silence, rapid fire, ranting, soliloquy. It kind of traverses like if Martin McDonough and like Tennessee Williams like smoked some really good weed and had a love child. That's sort of. So I love it all. I just think that when you're doing this, when you're working with silence and you're stripping things bare, to just be audacious as hell with it, because what do you have to lose?
And your
audience only needs 2 syllables, to really get it. They don't need 13. Save those 13 syllables for. I'm sorry, what did you say?
No, I was just going to say, because I was going to comment on your play type version, which has long moments that if you're an actor and you read it's a 2-character play, it's will they get together, will they get together, will they get together kind of love story. And when I read it, and I would say the same with many of the scripts of our participants, actors will tell you that it isn't about being explicit, it's about being clear. And there's that's 2 different things. Ada was talking about with her stage directions. They're not necessarily literal, but they're clear. And what an actor needs is just the room to be able to make the right decisions. Michael, I mentioned earlier to you that I was a participant in an early reading of a play of Michael's, and I played a character that I thought had a very heartbreaking scene. And when we did the reading and I did the scene, the audience burst out laughing. And I wondered with all 4 of you, it must be heartbreaking when an actor, I'm going to put it on myself, screws it up and does totally the wrong thing that you wanted. How do you deal with that? Anybody? Michael? How would you have dealt with that?
Well, one is write novels, right? If you don't want to trust your work to interpreters. Novels. It is hard. I mean, I think we all want audiences to feel things deeply and feel like there's a range of right responses. And then at times there are responses that aren't right. Interestingly, this moment in Opus, when we were previewing in primary stages in New York and the violin got smashed, from the first 2 previews, it got laughs. And I was quite panicky about it because it hadn't done that in the previous productions, but it was happening in New York. And we had to dissect it and go, all right, what is it about the prior novel? What is it about the 3 seconds leading up? What is it about what's the actor doing? To try to dissect it, to kill the laugh, because it was clearly shocking. It was getting a spontaneous response to it, but that was immediately going to a shocked laugh as opposed to a shocked gasp. And it took a couple rehearsals and a couple more previews to go, oh, I see. The actor needs to grip the violin in this particular way, which cues that this is abnormal, and therefore something is off, and therefore this is a little bizarre and maybe disconcerting, and the actor needs to make sure that he turns on stage and does this thing, and eventually it worked, and it never happened again.
Does that have to be in the published script then?
Yeah, I am not a believer, and I really enjoyed your conversation about stage directions, which I'd love to get into more deeply because I think they're evolving in really interesting ways right now as part of not pretending to be invisible, but actually being part of the expressive nature of the play. I also believe like you can't control your way into the perfect, platonically perfect production. we see stage directions, we see playwrights' notes and published scripts, and you can just feel sometimes the desire to control the event and don't do this thing and make sure you do this thing, right? And I think finding the line between the information that your collaborators need and not giving the sense that you need to control or can control everything is very important. It's a balancing act.
You just, we had a question from the audience, and it was very similar to what I asked, but basically it's saying, because I think perhaps even all four of you have been either actors or directors or producers in your own right. And so the question was a little different, which was, so many directors feel that stage directions get in the way, and that they want to I've been in production, involved with productions where the director has literally said, ignore all stage directions. And it's okay with O'Neill where he says that Christie has to be 5'6" with blonde hair and blue eyes, whatever. How do you feel about that? I'll start with Linda. How do you feel about that concept?
Yeah, I have acted and have had either get the script handed to you and all the stage directions crossed off, or you're told cross them all out first day of rehearsal. And like you said, for that type of play, it makes sense. But I think if you're working on, if the director's working on a new play, or a new or contemporary play, and if they say that about something I write, I'm going to assume they didn't really read the play, and they don't really know what it's about, or they don't, or they're not wanting to really engage with the work. And I thank God have not had that situation. But well, COVID, a lot of my productions got canceled. Could have happened. I don't know. Could have been happening right now.
Alex, how about any experiences with that about staging?
I mean, you're going to get me in trouble. Look, first of all, anybody that says get rid of all of anything is serving themselves, right? Because actors are intelligent beasts. Yep. And you can say to one, hey, listen, these stage directions say something. I don't want you to hold them sacrosanct, but there's an intention here somewhere in there, but we're going to do some other stuff. You can say a million things to intelligent actors. The director that comes in and says, all of it is just making it about themselves, and that's bullshit from the get-go. Especially when the writer is alive and maybe in the room. I mean, I think it's nonsense. Of course it's nonsense. It's not the director's prerogative to say get rid of the stage directions. That's not the job, right? It may be the job in cinema, as I've spent some time there, only in that the director says, I know what you wrote, and believe me, Alejandro has schooled me. I mean, my education came quick. He's like, I know you wrote this whole thing. If I take one shot of these glasses, I got it. I'm gonna move on. I was like, no, it's not. And I saw it. I was like, fuck, yeah, that's right. But on stage, that's a different human being. I think when Indra's writing something specifically like a double ellipsis in a moment, and somebody says, don't look at that, you're missing the essence of what she wrote, and it's not the director's job. And I have no patience. I think directors and playwrights is a very tricky relationship. And that's why you see relationships last so long between people who love each other, and because it's more about trust than it is about anything else. But I think it starts with the sentence, Greg, which is get rid of all the minute you said all, you lost me and you can go off.
Yeah.
And Audrey, you talk about the silences and Inda with the ellipses. Is that an out for the director in a sense? I mean, I'm not being facetious. In other words, what you've explained about how you do your script, all of it, with all these elements, every one of them is well thought out and is intentional. But if you leave it directly kind of opaque, is that? Do you think that that frees up the director a bit?
Well, I put a note in the production section saying, please mind all of the punctuation.
Right.
So yeah, it's part of the language of the play.
If you teach the reader, if you teach them that in your world, the way that you write, please fucking mind the punctuation, It scares me and pisses me off when there's just a dismissal of that. In recent years, and I just sent Alabaster to print, and let me tell you, I spent days just trying to work the stage directions and the author's notes so that they were right at the moment where we need them, but that they didn't act as a spoiler, for the play. But there's some things you just cannot leave to chance, and you really need to put that in your script. Like there's a moment in Alabaster where these two women are in bed together. They just survived this sort of terrible storm, and it says June pulls Alice into her clutches, and then the storm kind of kicks up and the lights go down. And I, having gone all the way, gone 6 cities now with this play. What I want from that moment is for it to be genuine. What I want from that moment is for every theater to interpret it the way that they want. So that's an example of how a note, not at the beginning of the script where it's a spoiler, but in the middle of the script, right after that moment, to say, hey theaters, you know your audience is better than me. You know what you want to do with your theater. It doesn't matter to me whether you intimate that they're sleeping together, that whether it's platonic or not, whether they get completely naked. You do it your way at your theater. The only caveat to that is June has got a lot of PTSD. And here's this new person in her bed. So if someone's going to initiate some sexy times, it needs to be June. So that's an example of giving a theater the freedom, a director the freedom to experiment, but saying, I draw the line at this one thing. Please don't let this come off as some sort of predatory thing where this new person is here in this room with this woman and is like making moves on her and going,
I just, we're unfortunately, believe it or not, we're running out of time, but I wanted to just get maybe some final thoughts from each of you, because each of you seem to have a lot of experience with collaborating in different genres and different media, and yet you all 4 of you, I think, have a point of view and voice. And so my final sort of question for each of you to just give me a 30-second soundbite that we can carry with us into the world and be inspired by. So no pressure. Is in a collaborative situation, right? In 30 seconds, what is your kind of message to yourself about retaining what you need to do, even in a collaborative situation? And I'll start with Anita because she's on my side of the debate. So how would you deal with it? You're now, you have a show and you're dealing with different collaborators. How do you keep yourself in the story, in the voice?
Well, for TV, it's more so in the room of like what you're pitching and trying to make sure that you are speaking up for the characters who have similar life experiences to you, and so that they are authentic in your pitching ideas and storylines, plot, dialogue that you hope will make it in, so that you don't have characters who don't feel real once it goes to air. And then also working on a musical. Alex, I have so many questions for you. Yes, please. But in that process, and it's based on the life of a real person, making sure that I understand it's just talking. It's the before the writing part. It's the talking in the room and on the phone calls and the emails, and making sure I understand what it is that you're trying to say and how can I pitch this idea that would maybe serve that, but also do the thing that I do, which is add some magical realism and some theatricality to it.
Yeah, I wish we had gotten to the magical realism, but another time perhaps. Michael, how about your collaborative experience? How do you stay Michael Holland?
Fortunately, no one else does it as easily as I do, so it's my default setting. I try to pick my battles so that I can let go of the things I can let go of, and that when I stand up for the things I stand up for, it means something, not because I've been cranky or uncooperative, but because this is a thing that's important to me. I try to lead with kindness first, and have kindness and candor work together. I don't think a collaborative relationship is worth anything if it doesn't have both. If it only has kindness, you settle for bad work, including your own. And if you have only candor, then things come across truthfully, but not in a way that it nurtures the relationship. So I try to very quickly establish a critical approach to what I'm making myself, so that people know that I'm not precious about the thing, and that I want them to push me to do my best, and that the relationship means that I also get to push them to do their best.
Okay. How about you, Audrey? Have you collaborated much in your career? Forgive me for not knowing that.
Collaborated? Do you mean other than just typical rehearsal processes?
No. As a writer with other writers.
Oh. I wrote a musical with Matt Nielsen for Cincinnati Playhouse. And we signed an artist agreement, and our lines were very clearly defined. I did the lyrics and I did the book, and he did the arrangements and the composing. And if ever we tossed the ball to the other, we knew that's how it works in collaboration. Sometimes you're going to be in a room of people, and they're going to be throwing things at you, and you're like, oh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's a great idea. And you'd be a fool not to pull in the best of all of that. That's the joy of a writer's room. Just make sure that you're protected, and that, you understand that there's a bit of a danger in there. And so my agent makes sure that whenever I'm collaborating, the lines are sort of clearly, I should say not the lines, but the credits, right? The writing credits are clearly laid out.
Right.
But also knowing that sometimes Matt's going to have a better idea for a lyric, and sometimes I'm going to push him in a different direction with composition. That's fine. He still gets the composition credit, and I still get the writing credit, because and so that just frees us up from stepping on each other, and we can breathe easy knowing there's no confusion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Alex, you sort of started to tell us that you've learned a lot from your collaborators.
Yeah, I mean, my friend and my brother Nico Giacobone, who I did a few films with, and we've become so close. We were in a writer's room for a TV show that we were discussing, and if you want to talk about a dream writer's room, I filled it with women that I loved. So Hallie Pfeiffer was in our room, Tanya Barfield was in our room, and a young playwright that nobody had ever heard of, but I saw her play at the New York Theater Festival, was Molly Reitzel, and this was our room. And I think the one thing that you learn is once you're collectively in the room, like cast in a play, the story is there, it exists. Our job is to uncover it, right? Our job isn't to fight, or our job, so if Hallie came up with the most insane idea, our job was to embrace it and see whether it was true to the foundation of what we were doing, not to say I wouldn't, or the one thing I won't have in my writer's room is somebody saying he would never do that or she would never do that, and we all agree to that, because if you say that, then you can never be surprised by anybody's behavior, which is insane. So I think the story exists without us. Together, our collective subconscious and artistry as rights, WRIGHTs, are going to do that together and find what's there, and what is no good will fall aside, what's good will stay, and we'll inspire each other. So there can't be ego in it. It's just let's drive that, let's find the damn answer. And it was successful for me because I surrounded myself with people that were brighter than me, so it worked out well.
Thank you so much. Listen, everybody, I can't believe that the time has gone. Everybody who's attending this session, I think you would agree that we have 4 people who have very distinctive voices, who are bringing a lot of experience. And what I'm particularly thrilled to always hear from you is how literate you all are about the world of theater, past, present, and future. And it's very inspiring to have you here. Please, everybody, Google these 4 folks and read their plays, and produce their plays if you're a producer, and do their monologues if you're a performer. And please stay tuned, because we're about to have 5 live performances of the winning 10-minute play festivals. But once again, just so that I acknowledge you all Audrey separately, Indra Craig Galvan, Alex Dinelaris Jr., and Michael Hollinger, it has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you.